Public Works, item 6 is, Dave, are you going to take this one?
Yes, thank you. This item is to consider an agreement with Metropolitan Water District and Cayugas Municipal Water District for local resources program funding for the city's Desalter project, and also to consider a resolution certifying the first addendum to the second supplemental environmental impact report for the Desalter project. The city recently entered into a construction contract to build the Desalter project, which will produce approximately 3,800 acre-feet per year potable water through the treatment of brackish groundwater. The overall project budget is estimated at $66.2 million total cost, with funding coming from $20 million in federal and state grants, $32.5 million in capital water fees and unrestricted water funds, and $12.7 million in water revenue bonds. To further offset the project capital and operations costs, the city applied for Metropolitan Water District's Local Resource Program, or LRP. Funding through that program is administered through Cayugas Municipal Water District, the wholesaler within Ventura County that the city buys imported water that comes through the Metropolitan Water District system. The LRP provides funding for the development of local water supplies to encourage that development, and the Desalter project is eligible for LRP funding, which is based on actual annual capital and operations costs to produce water through the Desalter. LRP funding will help keep the total cost of water produced from the Desalter below the cost of imported water. A three-party agreement between MWD, Cayugas, and the city is required for the LRP funding. Before Cayugas will execute the LRP agreement, a separate agreement between the city and Cayugas will be required, by which Cayugas will retain 1/3 of the LRP funding that comes from MWD, and that retention of monies will go towards defraying a portion of the capital costs previously incurred by Cayugas to construct the existing brine discharge pipeline and ocean outfall, which are necessary for the operation of Camarillo's Desalter. The agreement between Cayugas and the city is under development and will be presented to City Council for approval at a future date. LRP funding received by the city is based on the difference between the total cost for the Desalter to produce 1 acre-foot of water and MWD's full-service treated water rate. So that differential is what creates the opportunity for this incentive payment through LRP, because MWD's full-service treated water rate is lower than the total cost per acre-foot that'll cost to produce water from the Desalter. The LRP program provides 3 incentive payment structure alternatives to choose from. And the choice of those is really dependent on the project that's being funded and the financial structure, funding, and cost of the project. So the 3 options are sliding scale incentives up to $340 per acre-foot over 25 years, or sliding scale incentives up to $475, but for a shorter period of time, 15 years, or a fixed incentive for our project at $185 per acre-foot over 25 years. The incentive payment structures options were evaluated, and it was determined that the city will receive the greatest benefit by proceeding with the first alternative of sliding scale incentives up to $340 per acre-foot over 25 years. The report includes quite a bit of detailed information on the funding and the calculations. An example with a summary of the estimated total LRP payment to the city after the deduction from Cayugas is $10.8 million, and that will be over the life of the LRP funding, which under that option is for 25 years. The actual estimated length of time of payment will be more like 21, 22 years. That at that point, the cost differential will be 0, so we won't be obtaining that incentive payment from LRP. So in a nutshell, it starts out with the cost differential being high, so we qualify for that $340 probably for a year or two, and then with the cost differential, because our cost of producing water will be coming down, and the cost of met water will continue to rise, so that differential will become smaller, and so will the annual LRP payment. But all of that said, over an estimated 22 years, that we'll see that $10.8 million coming from the LRP funding. Prior to entering into this LRP funding agreement, MWD requires that the city names MWD as a responsible agency and include reference to LRP funding in the project's environmental documents. We have environmental impact report and environmental assessment, and we've also prepared supplemental EIR and EAs, if you remember, through the process of this project. Several times we've had to address the different sites within our environmental documents. So it calls now for an addendum to the, we're actually going to be making an addendum to the second supplemental environmental impact report to name MWD as a responsible agency and include a reference to LRP funding. CEQA allows for this type of minor addition, modification, therefore we can proceed with making the change by addendum. The suggested action tonight is to authorize the city manager to enter into a local resource program funding agreement with Metropolitan Water District and Cayugas Municipal Water District for the North Pleasant Valley Desalter project and adopt a resolution certifying the first addendum to the second supplemental environmental impact report. And that concludes my report.
All right, I'll start off this really quickly. Dave, the local resource program, is this a grant that they have, or is this just a a program that they've got for viable agencies that can apply for this? I mean, how is the money generated here for this?
The money essentially comes from the rates that water users and, well, it's actually agencies that buy water from Metropolitan Water. So within their budget system, they've set aside funds that come from their collection of rates that they receive towards this program. And essentially, it's an incentive program to incentivize agencies to develop projects, essentially, and like ours is doing, is developing an unusable source of water that's going to reduce the demand of state-imported water on Metropolitan's system.
Okay, so that money could be used to defer some of our costs to the Desalter then?
Exactly.
If we get approved for this, in other words? That 10.8, I believe it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, I know there's some other questions. Ms. Tremblay?
Dave, I had a number of questions about the alternatives in the program, but just for context purposes, this is what I think folks need to understand. This is good news. These are incentive payments that are coming to the city for construction and operation of the desalter. Would you agree?
Yes.
And it makes an expensive project more affordable. So I'm only asking these questions in light of the three separate alternatives that were provided. And then there's a lengthy contract at the end which was written for alternative number 1 as opposed to alternative 2 and 3. But if I'm understanding alternative number 1 correctly, that is, it's a maximum incentive of $340 per acre foot for a total term of 25 years, right?
Correct.
And you would expect, because of the differential, that there's a premise in there. I want you to explain why alternative 1 is superior to alternatives 2 and 3. But I think with regard to alternative 1, it's fair to say there's a maximum cap on what the city can receive back, and it probably, though, would be within 21 years based on the reduction of that differential, correct?
That's correct.
Just for context purposes, GMA has provided a 25-year term or 25-year consent for pumping of groundwater for the desalter, right?
Correct.
And by contrast, our revenue bond term would be repaid within 20 years, correct?
Correct.
So this is all dovetailing in a relatively close period of time. But why is alternative 1 superior to alternative 2 and 3?
Right. In respect to alternative 2, it's just the math ends up generating, based on our calculated cost of, projected cost of desalter water. So compared to alternative 2, alternative 1 generates the total estimated payment, a little less than $2 million more for alternative 1.
Right.
And that's strictly based on that cost differential. And again, a number of factors go into that. The projected rate increase that we expect from from Metropolitan that's handed through to us through Cayugas. We have a projection of that that's variable, what reality is going to be year to year. But essentially, by spreading the term over more than 15 years, we're able to get that incentive off of Alternative 1 for a longer period of time than under Alternative 2.
Right. Now moving to Alternative 3, which is the fixed rate alternative, that actually has a slightly larger MWD payment over a period of years, but that reduces the the incentive acre foot price from $340 down to $185. So why?
Correct.
Right. So what's the rub with Alternative 3?
I could put it this way. Alternative 3 would be preferred if we were guaranteed that we would be pumping for 25 years. And there's enough, the way the project, the GMA approval, our contingency monitoring plan, the groundwater modeling indicates that there could be a possibility at year 20 that it may start affecting groundwater levels, and we may need to be pumping less than the 4,500 acre feet per year. It's not for sure a definite thing, but the comfort level isn't there to say we for sure can pump 4,500 acre feet for 25 years, and therefore we want to go with that fixed rate. As we also set up the bond issuance on the repayment on 20 years, and that's the horizon that we're very comfortable with saying that yes, we should likely be able to pump that 4,500 acre feet for a solid 20 years, likely more, but not for sure enough to say let's go with the fixed rate.
Okay, and so that modeling in and of itself, in terms of estimated volume of what, that has not changed in the last year.
Correct. No.
It's at the 20-year mark. There's more of a concern.
Correct.
If I remember right, and I know, Charlotte, you sit on Fox Canyon GMA, I was curious in the contract in Section 3 on big page 11, I think it probably bears repeating that Camarillo, it's very explicit that Camarillo, the city, is the sole owner of the facilities, and neither Met nor Cayugas have any ownership right in the facilities, correct?
Correct.
But that said, at the end of 20 or even 25 years, there would be the possibility that Fox Canyon or another entity could come in and say, you know what, we think there's more water to be pumped, and we want to expand the use of that desalter or otherwise buy in, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's always been a part of the discussion, and even possibly sooner than 25 years. The initial modeling and approach for pumping out of this mound was that it was estimated that 9,000 acre feet per year could be pumped and treated. Mm-hmm. So, but to move forward and gain approval, and the allocation of the 4,500 is what we landed on, a half size, knowing that possibly in the future, if agreements can be reached and an agency comes forward to sponsor or to champion an expansion to pump more and treat more, then that's, it has that ability to do that.
Well, to go back to the conversation from a minute ago, we're very comfortable based on modeling that 4,500 acre feet per year for at least 20 years is going to be there. The 9,000 acre foot level for 20 years, I don't know what the modeling suggested on that, but the inference would be that it would be a lesser period of time.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
Okay.
I thought it was for the same amount of time, and I'm not sure where county staff came from. I'll say it. I'm not sure where county staff came from, but when we requested 9, they were very much against that much, and because what if? And so it got reduced. But there's always the possibility not just to go later, but they were talking about coming in and doing a dual project at the same time, which, in my mind, as the discussion left me wondering, so why reduce it? Obviously, they wanted to be part of the other half.
Right, but if I recall correctly, the facilities will be there's the physical space available at the facilities to effectuate that if that became a possibility 20 years down the line. There was a potential expansion there, right?
Correct.
And the lines are,
right.
The pipelines are sized, and the underground facilities are sized appropriately for that, if that became the case, right?
Right, right. Not 100% of them, but the major structures, there's a partially buried concrete holding tank that's being sized appropriately for future expansion. And also our administration building will probably have to be expanded if we have a planned expansion.
Well,
I'm just kidding on that.
Yeah, I figured you were on that one because you said it with a straight face. I'm teasing, without a straight face. But I think with all that in context, alternative one to me makes the most sense relative to an agreement because we think we're going to be able to receive the most in terms, receive the maximum amount of incentive payments at $340 per acre foot over that course of 21 years roughly. And by that time, we'll have retired the revenue bonds.
Correct.
Well, unless they've been refunded and so on. But anyway, or do a refunding issuance. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Milche?
Quick question, and also in regard to the alternatives. Under what scenario would alternative number 2 or 3 become, say, more viable than alternative 1? My assumption is if the MWD's water rates don't accelerate at the rate in which we anticipate. I assume that our anticipation for their rates increasing is based off of direction that they've given and provided. Is that correct?
Yes, right.
Okay. And approximately what is that rate? If memory serves me right, I thought it was 2%, relatively 2% year over year.
I believe it's 4%.
4%.
Is what this model's using. Yeah, which it's been more than that in years. I don't know that it's been much less, maybe in the realm of 3% or so.
So the heart of my question is we don't have any reason to believe that 4% year over year growth in MWD's rates is not going to materialize.
Correct, right,
Okay.
right. So that to say that what you're saying is the other alternative, especially 2, would be more viable if that cost differential stays large, which, yeah, if Met's rate for some reason doesn't go up as expected, then that differential will be larger for whatever period of time. It's just such a big unknown based on what we do know and the most logical and assumptions that make sense. It indicates the option 1 is the better way to assure the biggest amount of LRP funding for the project over time.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay.
Move to authorize the city manager to enter into a local resources program funding agreement with Metropolitan Water District and Cayugas Municipal Water District for the North Pleasant Valley Desalter project. And adopt resolution certifying the First Amendment to the Second Supplemental Environmental Impact Report.
Second.
So motion is second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. That passes unanimously.